Welcome to another episode of Pirkei Avot. We are on chapter 6, Mishnah 6, which is a lengthy Mishnah. So we've split it up into 4 parts, and today we're going to be doing part 2, Bezrat Hashem, which of course we are dedicating in memory of Levy ben Moshe Esther and Elisha Yael ben Levy, and also in memory of Moshe ben Binyamin. And I'm going to hand you over to Michael.
Thank you, Rabbi Mashiach. So this is the second episode of 4 of the 6th Mishnah of the 6th Perek. And we, in the beginning, just to recap, this Mishnah was telling us that a Talmud Chacham, or someone who wishes to master the Torah, has to acquire 48 things. These are kind of attributes or things that you need to pick up along the way in order to advance to a high level of Torah study. And what Abarbanel has noted is that these 48 are split up into sections. It's like an ascending evolution of the person's character and abilities. So the first 9 stages, according to Abarbanel, relating to Torah mastery, are more directed at the beginner. And these next 13, which we shall be going over in this episode, pertain to the more advanced scholar. But let's recap as to the first 9. I'll just state them so you can remind yourself. The first 9 were by studying, actually getting down and making the effort to study. The second was attentive listening. The third was by ordering one's speech. The fourth was by the heart's understanding. The 5th and 6th were through awe and reverence. The 7th was having humility. 8th was having a cheerful demeanor. The 9th was retaining purity. And now those are all the beginner stages of the kind of course of Torah mastery. And now we are going to begin the first of 13 attributes that deal with a more advanced scholar. And I will be using the Ethics of Sinai by Irving Bunim as a reference to many of the commentaries and ideas in these, as I've done recently and as I will do until the end of this Perek. Attribute number 10 is by attending upon scholars. This is actually what it sounds like. It is actually you show respect to your teachers, but more than that, you should become close to them. In other words, you should observe how a great person conducts himself, how he approaches his day, how he approaches his learning. On top of that, you must obviously connect yourself to his studying, but look how he deals with the simple things in life. Rambam has told us in Hilchot Dayat, you can sanctify every aspect of your life. You can make every aspect of your life holy. From every physical exertion, every physical action can be actually l'shem shomayim. That means you can actually make something that is mundane holy, and that's very, very important. So here, there's a story about a royal servant told a king of Israel about the prophet Elijah's disciple. And he said, and I quote this from Malachim chapter 3 verse Pasuk 11, Elisha is here, who poured water on the hands of Elijah, and not, and I quote, who learned prophecy from Elijah. It meant more than he had tended to his master's personal needs. So does the Torah call Yoshua also the attendant of Moshe? And I quote this from Numbers 11:28. His attendant Yoshua did not stir from within the tent. This was a key part of Yoshua's training to become Moshe's successor, as Elisha became Elijah's. Also, this is an interesting story about Robbie Akiva. He learned this truth the hard way. Once he said he was walking along a journey when he found a dead body with no one around. There were clearly no relatives to give the dead man burial, so he was a mate mitzvah. Having found the body, Rabbi Akiva had a solemn duty to give it a proper burial. About 4 mills, which was about 2 miles, he carried the body until he reached the proper cemetery, and he made there the grave. When he came to study with Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, he told them about this incident where he had to carry this body this certain distance, and their reply, surprisingly, was, for every single step you took, it is as if you shed blood, because he had shamed the dead man. As we know, the law required him to make the body's grave right there where he found it. And Rabbi Akiva thought, and I quote, "When I meant to act virtuously, I incurred guilt. When I do not mean to act virtuously, how much more, certainly so." And from that moment on, he would not stop attending upon scholars. And when he himself became a big chacham, he would teach, and I quote, "Whoever has not personally served scholars deserves death." This is mentioned in Nazir, chapter 7, and also Smachot and Derech Eretz Zuta. Also, a final reference here, Rav Lev ben Sarah, one of the most devout disciples of Rav Dov Ber, the Maggid of Medricht, I quote, "I did not go to the Maggid to hear Torah from him. I came to see how he laces his shoes and unlaces them."
Wow.
This is quoted in Chajim Bloch. This was Die Gemeinde der Chassidim. This was printed in Berlin in 1920. Down to the lowliest act, holiness can inform the life of the tzaddik. You should serve him and you will sense it. So that was number 10, attending upon scholars. Number 11.
Actually says it in the Gemara, sorry to interrupt. It says in the Gemara, I believe it's in Barachot, if I'm not mistaken, Gadol, or words to that effect, it's greater to serve somebody who's a chacham than to learn from him. So how many incidents we have in the Gemara about chachamim who were very, very careful as to what they did in public because their Talmidim were watching them and would learn from them. There's an incident in the Gemara with Rabbi Huda, if I'm not mistaken, who Rabbi Huda and I can't remember the name of one of the Talaim. One stood up, one sat down when it was talking about Kriyat Shema, and they were questioning each other. Why did you do this? The different explanations of why they did what they did, but they were very, very concerned that if the Talmidim would have seen them, and when we're talking about Talmidim, we're not talking about the little kids, we're talking about holy Tanaim of their own right. When they would have seen what these great rabbis were doing, they would paskin halacha from that for generations. So you've got to be very, very well. If in and of yourself, you've got to be very, very careful what you do because other people are watching you and taking an example from you. But also, it shows the greatness of learning from the mere, like Michael, like what you just said, from the mere mundane actions of a person of a holy stature.
Right. So the next attribute is number 11. This by dikduk chaverim, which is precision with fellow students. As we know, if you study by yourself, things can remain unknown or unrealized, or even you just misunderstand them, and you can become none the wiser. So how does this precise work with fellow students correct this, it's through reviewing lessons in your Torah and to seek precise knowledge about every last detail that will puzzle you. Asking questions, as Rav Yosef ibn Nachmias puts it, one student asks a question, another one answers this. One raises a difficulty, and another one resolves this. So this fills the gaps in people's understandings, because you maybe have something that you think is clear in your mind, and your chevusa may question you on it. And number one, he questions you, so he questions your knowledge on that. You're forced to reevaluate what you're thinking, and perhaps proposes something else in your mind, like perhaps a better understanding. So this kind of backwards and forwards is very important with chavusas. Also, we know, as a quote from the Talmud, from the Torah, it says, "Iron sharpens iron." This is from Mishnah 27:17, not the Torah, it's King Solomon's Mishnah. So that's very important. We must have this to and fro with our chavusas. You know, when it's very, very different when you're actually with somebody. First of all, we all know that the Shekhinah rests on you when you are studying with another person, and that will open up things that we are not aware of in terms of the sort of intellectual to and froing, but also your questions that you wouldn't ask yourself if you're studying by yourself, you are perhaps posed by your chevusa, gives you a better understanding. So that was number 11, precision with fellow students. Number 12, by pilpul, which is the sharp discussion of pupils. This is quite similar, but let's look at this a bit more. Rabbi Yehuda Anossi said, "Much did I learn from my masters, but and more from my fellows, but from my pupils most of all." This is from Ta'anit, Daf 7, Amud Aleph. So, what does this mean? It means that when you're a teacher, and you are, the best way, I think is Richard Feynman, the famous physicist, said, if you want to understand something, you really have to teach it, and then you'll truly understand it. And that is very, very true, because once you try to verbalize it, the whole process of your store of knowledge becomes different. When you verbalize it, it almost crystallizes it in your mind, and it opens avenues that you cannot get when you retain it within your mind. Only when you verbalize something, as you verbalize it, sometimes your mind just opens up to new things. So when you try to teach something, you understand it better. And apparently, I remember Richard Feynman said, unless you can explain any idea to a child clearly, you don't understand it. Very, very, very true.
Wow.
So this is, and let's look at the actual verb pilpel is related to the word pilpul, which is to search and to dig, from the noun pilpla, which is pepper. When a student embarks on his teaching career, he may feel kind of smug and settled, but after many years of hard study, he feels he knows his Torah. The pilpul of his own students will soon unsettle him, this peppering. They want to search and dig, and they may propose questions that feel a bit kind of peppery to the teacher, but that's a good thing. Okay, let's move on to number 13, which is by yishuv, or sedatedness. This relates to kind of composure of the minds. This is aptly followed on from pilpul hatalmidim. The young will ask peppery questions, and the teacher has to answer in a settled, sedate way. He mustn't answer in a confused state. As Midrash Shmuel writes, matters of halacha are deep, and only a sedate, settled mind working with steady caution can find truth. Another version in commentaries is that this word is yeshiva. One of the famous Hillel's maxims is marbe yeshiva, marbe chokhmah. The more schooling, the more wisdom. Literally, the word means sitting, but in our time, it denotes the only kind of Torah school worthy the name, where students and teachers meet for regular sessions of concentrated study. Nowhere else can you really develop any mastery of Torah as in yeshiva. And Abarbanel, who calls this the correct version, adds an indication from the Torah. And Yoshua, a youth, would not depart from the tent of study. So perhaps this means not sedateness, but actually yeshiva, like a house, of a place of study. Okay, so that's number 13. Now number 14, by knowledge of Torah and Mishnah. So we know that we have to know the Mikra, the reading, the text of our written Torah, and Mishnah to study and review our oral Torah, which originally was not written but studied and reviewed from memory alone. This combination of written and oral Torah, the second explaining the first, forms a very solid foundation of the Talmud Chacham's life. Therefore, we have to stress the knowledge of the Torah in our programs of schooling, and not just like study courses to complete and then abandon other things. You have to. It requires constancy, as the Torah leads to higher levels. Even at the age of 90, the Chofetz Chaim was found still immersed in Bereshis, the book of Bereshis. That's noted here. Now, the next three attributes, which are 15 to 18, are the following. They are by minimizing business and minimizing worldly matters and minimizing pleasure and minimizing sleep. This is very important. We have to obviously work in order to earn a livelihood, but we shouldn't make this the be-all and end-all of our lives. We have to also not involve ourselves in social climbing. We mustn't, waste time perhaps attending social conventions that would take our time away from what we should be doing. And, it's good to have a little bit of, you enjoy sports or other things that would balance your life out, but you mustn't do it to excess, is what it's saying here. Also, sleep. One Chacham holds that the night is made for sleep, another that it was made for study. This was mentioned in Eruvim 65a. Although sleep is a physical necessity, you shouldn't oversleep. Rambam, of course, the great physician, declared that 8 hours was the medium or balanced way, and the Chachamim also say, and I quote here, whoever busies himself with Torah study in the night, HaKadosh Baruch Hu draws a thread of grace through his life during the day. So there is time for both. But there's also, the night is a good time to study, as we know that King David awoke to his study, I think at midnight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's quoted in Psalms 119:62. At midnight I arise to praise you, referring to Hashem.
He had this kinor v'naver. He had this certain type of wind chimes type of thing, which was he used to sleep 40 winks.
Yeah,
like a horse.
Yeah. Number 19 is by minimizing chatter. So obviously there's some talk is necessary. We have to obviously communicate to get along. Torah study itself has to be done through talk and discussion. But otherwise, as we've learned in Shemana Purakim, Hilchot Deot, and even earlier on in this, in Pirkei Avot, that silence is strongly preferred. I think it was about maybe 80 odd years ago, Rav Raphael Shapiro, the son-in-law of the Nitziv, Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, lived in Volodyin. He was a man who spoke very little, appearing to count and measure every word he uttered. Once his father-in-law asked him, Reb Raphael, you are so quiet all the time. Don't you ever get tired of being so silent? After a thoughtful pause, Rav Raphael answered, I do sometimes get tired, but then I rest a bit and I keep silent some more. So this rule can also suggest that even in Torah study, as the Talmud puts it, and I quote, a man should ever teach his pupil in a brief, concise way. This is from Pesachim 3b. So elaboration and excessive chatter can actually confuse somebody. A mind that can achieve precision in speech is a more effective communicator. And now, number 20, by minimizing laughter. Rabbi Akiva, I'd like to refer to Rabbi Akiva, whenever he saw his listeners to his shiurim begin to get drowsy, because he talked for a long time, he would say something funny, and the laughter was like a freshening spray of water, and people would sit up again and would be more involved in his teachings. Rabbah began every lesson with his pupils by saying something witty. But when he obviously got into his subject matter, there was utter, sober reverence. This is recorded in Ta'anit 22 Amud Aleph. Now, attribute 21, by long-suffering patience. So, you need this, whether you're a pupil or a teacher, this is a quality that is needed. When something you're learning in the Torah or in Gemara is perplexing, you shouldn't give up in despair. A little bit of patience and perseverance goes a long way. You will ultimately see the light of understanding. So a teacher also shouldn't lose his patience with his students. Sometimes they can irritate a teacher or even infuriate them, but you should be ready to repeat his lesson again and again until it's understood. I think it was Hillel who warned in the second Perek, I think it was Mishnah 6, that, and I quote, a quick-tempered person cannot teach.
He exemplified that, that story when somebody came to test him. He was made a wager, 400 dinars or shekels or something, that he would be able to make Hillel angry. The whole story, he kept interrupting Hillel Azaken in the bathhouse, and Hillel just showed he lived the maxim that you just quoted.
Yeah. On top of that, for a teacher or one who teaches, anger can bring confusion. A calm mind can be obscured by rage. We learn in the Torah. I think it was. We're recording this. I think it was this week's Sedra, when the Hebrew soldiers returned from vanquishing the Midianites, and I quote, Moshe was angry with the officers for sparing the enemy's treacherous women. Then we find Elazar, the Kohen, explain to the soldiers the divine laws for cleansing both war booty metals and themselves from ritual impurity. But because Moshe couldn't state these laws, apparently the explanation was that in his anger he forgot them. This is from Numbers 31, 12 to 24, and Gemara Pesachim 66b. King Solomon said in his wisdom, he who has long-suffering patience has great understanding, but a short-tempered person exalts folly. And lastly, in this episode, number 22, a good heart. So this indicates a generous attitude of kindness and benevolence to everybody in your life. A serious, dedicated Talmud Chacham needs this quality. Otherwise, if he finds a fellow student giving a better explanation in a shiur than him, or generally outshining him, he will turn destructive and overly critical and try to tear this person down. But if you have a good heart, and you study Torah and you transmit it without turning bitter at the lack of either reward or anything else, it's a great attribute. So also King Solomon's words can also be priceless here. And I quote from Mishnah 17:16, why is there a price in a fool's hand for buying the Torah's wisdom? Because he has no heart. So having a good heart, as we know from also earlier, I think it was the second parak of this Pirkei Avos, we were taught about the qualities of having a good heart. It outweighs everything else. And Abarbanel notes that here ends the qualities of a grown disciple as he starts his course of mastery over the Torah. In the next episode, we're going to go through the next 12 qualities that are primarily for the fully ordained or graduate Talmid Chacham who is about to embark on the mature years of his life.
Thank you very much, Michael. Beautiful. I very much look forward to the next episode. In the meantime, have a wonderful and blessed week.